be able to hear me? Again, we would appreciate if you can confirm on the chat. Good. So there is a speaker that was not originally planned in the program, at least is not described in the program of the flyer. And I decided personally to invite this speaker, mainly because of his age and his thoughts. We are talking about the future of pig production in this society, and all the speakers were mature people. So I would like also to hear a voice from the young ones. And he's definitely a young person. He's a PhD student in my department at the University of Copenhagen, PhD in virology, porcine virology. But he is also competent in this field because he has spent some years working in pig practice. So he has both the scientific knowledge, but also the knowledge, hands-on knowledge on veterinary practice. So his name is Kasper Petersen. Kasper, I think I have said enough. You can also add more about you, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Please go ahead sharing your screen. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much, Luca. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
And like this, right?
All good.
Recording in progress.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we see the screen and we hear your voice. Go ahead.
Can you reply? I cannot hear anything.
I try, but it seems you cannot hear me. We can see the slide in presentation mode, and we can hear
Okay,
your
great.
voice.
So I will start this introduction to the plenary session, and yeah, the program says that a diverse array of perspective will be presented, and I actually think it has been pretty good until now, and it also suggests that we should discuss a little bit, and in a discussion different aspects of this topic is presented. So I hope you like this aspect. The program also suggests that at least two different perspectives is presented, but I will leave this as a cliffhanger to say that that I think at least two others is also missing. However, at least Jonathan has touched upon this a little bit, and I am actually quite happy to follow his presentation because I like that a little bit much. However, I think we should. In the beginning, we talk a lot about antimicrobial free production, but I think I like to turn the topic a little bit around to say that we need to think about what is the use of what is the reason that we use these antibiotics, and take that approach a little bit. Okay, so Luca, he asked me if I could give a short provocative talk, or I better like to say it's maybe reflective thoughts from a younger veterinarian's mind. So why me? Kasper Petersen from a very pig dense area in Denmark. I'm raised on a pig farm. I'm educated pig farmer actually. That can you be in Denmark? I have had 5 years in Sigis along with my veterinary studies, and then I was a veterinarian for 1.5 years in a very professional practice of Denmark, I think, and now I'm a PhD student. So let's say it like this, I know exactly what's going on in all corners. And with this presentation, I might put my ass at slap height, but I hope you will be a little open-minded also. And yeah, so the striking issue is, in my mind, that the consumers are quite short thinking when they are to buy products of animal origin. And why is that actually? Because it really has no consequences when they are to buy the stuff down in the supermarket. They are not confronted with resistant bacteria in a sepsis when they are buying the meat. Um, it doesn't make the world a better place whether they take the cheap or the expensive meat. It that requires some kind of long-term thinking, and there is actually quite substantial evidence that people in general think in short terms. So now the provocative part starts, and I think I have already fulfilled that by showing you this picture of Mr. Elon Musk. He kind of splits the water quite a lot. But the thing I like about him is that he's a long-term thinker. He always think, if I do what I do now, can I do the same in 100 years? And if you say no to that question, then you have to change your behavior right away. And I think making a space rocket that can land on its feet just by an insurance for humanity by making it a multiplanetary species argues very good for that. So let's take that goal definition over to the pigs. And maybe it's not 99% happy pigs, but maybe it's just happy pigs aligned with naturally happy pigs. Maybe it's not entirely no suffering, but maybe it's just suffering aligned with what's in nature. And we should, of course, still provide a sustainable source of protein to most of the human beings in the world. So how does he do this? He likes to use this method of first principle thinking, where he kind of breaks the topic down to the smallest bricks. And in our case, let's take the example enteritis, which is the diagnosis for the most use of antimicrobials. Are you still with me?
Yes, we are.
I guess so. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit. What do the pig industry strive for 2024? It's basically providing protein and fat to consumers around the world. Due to the free trade, lowest cost will always win, and this free trade is quite important, apparently. Therefore, heads count more than quality, and I can make numerous calculations comparing Denbred sows with other breeds, and if you can take care of these very sensitive animals, they will always win. However, we are not all 100% professional, so it forces a cost of some suffering, and that is actually not aligned with our goal definition. So, what is the reason for using these antimicrobials? We have stated it's enteritis most of the time, and that is basically curing or securing welfare and um, help on the performance in a microbial saturated environment. Or you can see it in another way, that we compensate for early weaning. So is it really biologically realistic to not to use antimicrobial when we raise numerous pigs together in a dirty environment at no place under circumstances of cross-fostering, early weaning? additional weaner mixing with a microbial susceptible host prone to intestinal and especially respiratory infections. I like to argue we treat a disease condition that is caused by improper management, and I actually think all presentations today also argue for that indirectly. So let's change the management. Let me compare two scenarios. Nowadays, we have 28 lactation days um, in a positive scenario. We have a little bit issue with the reproduction gives us 2.3 liters a year. With the then bred 19 live-born, 14 of these goes to sow, 5 goes to the cross-foster. Mortality at 14%, I think that's pretty average, and gives us 12 and 4.3 to weaning of these, and that equals 37.5 wean per year in a very positive scenario. So let me introduce a future example. We increase the lactation period to 10 weeks. I know Jens Peter have had a master thesis student looking at the organic pigs, and they start to wean themselves after 10 weeks. Let's play with this scenario. We have the same reproductive issues, and that gives us 1.8 liters a year now. We have 12 live born, and that equals exactly what the sow can take care of. However, we still have a little bit mortality, and that gives us 11 wean per weaning and a little less than 20 per sow per year. So if you divide these two numbers, we get a little less than 50% decrease in pork consumption, which will increase the price and lower the demand. It means that we have to eat less pork. It will probably be good for our health. It will also be good for the climate, at least for the Danish fjords. It will also be good for the welfare of the pigs and resistance as well. So why this never will happen is because we have the free trade across different cultures. So the issue is really low compliance towards quality food. And actually, Jonathan touched upon this topic a little bit, and we say the same thing. This is a graph of this household spendings divided into decades, and I think I do not have to point out the direction of the tendency in our food spendings, and I think this is quite sad actually. So let me be a little scientific also in this discussion or presentation. This is a quite recent paper from a Danish group, 2023, where they asked 1,500 respondents from 4 different countries about their willingness to pay for sustainable pork. The results were quite clear that 1 out of 10 pay 20% more, and that is basically the same as already have been said previously today, but it is very far away from 47%. Another example is this Danish television program a few years ago where they invited some animals home to normal families, and then they were to take care of them animals for a month or so, and then they were to choose if they were to eat it in the end. And do I have to say that all of the families could not live without the meat? One cannot have one's cake and eat it too. Consumers, they will indeed not have the issue about resistant bacteria and many other things where if they were really confronted. They will just have the cheap protein and fat and lots of it. However, it cannot be reached under current conditions, I like to argue. But they are short-term thinkers. They don't know because they are not aware of the issue and the consequences, really. So Avant aims at developing and testing efficacy and sustainability of alternatives to antimicrobials of the management of pig enteritis. Maybe that's short-term thinking. Wonder what long-term thinkers would think. And back to this program, of course, we miss the consumers and we miss the politicians' point of view. But who really represents the goal, or the pigs, you could say? Let me discuss that a little bit in the end here. The farmer, he just produce what there's asked for, and he tend over time to become a little pen blind. He is very economically dependent and any time driven to lower the cost because that goes directly down to his own pocket. Veterinarians, they are quite informed about this topic. However, they are economically dependent because the farmer pay their paycheck, and they are quite small groups. So do they really have anything to say? Then we have the consumers. Most of them, they are totally uninformed. They are economically very dependent, and they better like other expenses. We have seen that. And they have really no relationship to the animals in the production anymore. Then we have the politicians. They should be very informed, at least they could be. They are also economically independent. They tend to be a little hard. It tend to be a little hard for them to change their mind, and in the end, unpopular legislation will lower their popularity, and maybe they only think about votes. So my question is, it looks like a catch-22 this. So which way do we really go with this? And that's all I had. Thanks for the attention, and thanks for asking me, Luca.
It is me thanking you, Casper, for this very inspiring talk. I hoped at the end that you could conclude with some answers, or at least some points to start this discussion, but you also end up with another question, another layer of questions. But in essence, where would you start? I would start actually the discussion today from the end of this, because I followed the trajectory, the logic of your talk. So I would like to throw this question to the audience here. Who talks for the pigs now? If you have any follow-up comment, Casper, please let us know.
No, actually not but no, actually not.
Can we
Okay, Jens Peter?
Yeah. Hello, Casper.
Hello?
Do you hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. And you kind of suggest a system where you give high priority to animal welfare and health and so on. But it is not possible to make it on the market, you could say, economy and export economy conditions. But basically, this is what they do in a country like Norway, as I see it. They have a closed market. They have very, very strict rules, and it is decided by politicians, and and maybe the consumers even like it. I don't know. So in a way, it's that economical model. I mean, you could probably do that in individual countries with high standard of living, and agree in some way with politicians, consumers, everybody to do it. But you could not compete at the world market. I agree on that at the time we are here. So basically, we have a very good model of this system in a country like Norway, which is out of the EU. That's important. They're not part of it. Then they couldn't do it, of course. And I also think it's worth looking there. I think they have a very, I mean, I'm very fascinated about the pig production. I think it looks really good what they're doing.
Can you hear? Yes? Thanks for the presentation. I think a bit, I agree with you, Jens Peter, the dilemma a bit is where you put the problem. No, we are in Europe. I'm living in the Netherlands, but we have people Denmark, Norway. So there, let's say, we have enough money to pay, and I think, of course, people prefer to fly and to go to the beach. But I think there's no problem to pay more for food. It's only that people maybe they are not educated. But I think the biggest discussion is, okay, we could centralize the problem to say, okay, Europe, we are over producing, let's say, so for Europe we could go down and then try to increase the standards in Europe to meet the European demand, and then the rest go down. But on the other hand, we have seen from Jonathan that the population in the world is growing, so there's more demand for protein globally, let's say. And I think where we get lost, at least in my opinion, is which role from Europe do we want to play? Do we go back and we follow Norway and we say, 20 sows per farm will be the newest standard for Europe, and then you get subsidized to have these 20 sows in a farm, and you work part-time in a bank or part-time as a teacher, and the rest you have hobby pigs, let's say. Or we want to use our knowledge and we want to lead this discussion to say, okay, it's possible to produce pigs in a different way. I think we all agree that and we are doing a lot of steps because the antibiotic reduction already has been quite a bit reduced, let's say. But let's say still we have quite work to do, and I think, from my perspective, would be more interesting to try to use what we have learned so far, but continue, let's say, to try to feed the people that maybe have less resources and is not willing to pay that much for food, but still they want to eat, and not only look to Europe and say, okay, we have enough pigs in Denmark and the Netherlands, we reduce 50%, we cover our needs, and if they need pork in Africa, they need to make it themselves or eat vegetables if they don't have pork, let's say. So that's a bit, in my opinion, the dilemma. What position do we want to take? We go back to protect and look at country level. This is what we have, and that is it. Or do we want to continue innovation, let's say, to still feed the world, let's say. That's a bit, I would say, the two options.
Thank you, Francesc. There is a question from one of the previous comments from one of the previous speakers.
Yeah, a comment. In Europe, we have a very good example. This is Switzerland. Switzerland has a very developed, very welfare-friendly, very small farms, pig production. But if you look, it only works because they have a very strict regulation regarding import-export. You cannot bring meat simple to Switzerland. And the consumer is still trying to buy in Germany. So 15% of the pig meat, as I know the figures from Switzerland, is imported by private persons with their car from Germany and France to Switzerland. Because they want to, even if they have enough money, they are not really paying it for this consumption and for the production and the label production. So it means for me that we have, and this could be perhaps one of our consensus today, if we want to go further in the antibiotic-free production and we want to make our systems better and with higher health status, that we need more or less antibiotics and we need more vaccines and so on, it is costing money. And we are in and this is also what we are shown yet in the presentation of Jens Peter. So we have an international market. So we need much more on European level the principle of reciprocity. So in the pharmaceutical regulation in the 29/6, we have such a principle. It was the French delegation who brought it in. So if we have a ban of certain antibiotics for usage in animals due to human reasons in Europe, all the imports should be also conform to this principle, that they are not allowed to use certain groups of antibiotics if they want to import. So the principle of reciprocity is a very important thing, and it should be much more implemented in the European legislation. This is, in my understanding, one of the key points. If we don't have, we can make in Europe a lot of legislation, but if we are not looking that all the others which want to come to our market are also in conform with this legislation, so the principle of reciprocity, we will have a problem. Because, as I said already in my presentation, if they are doing something which is cheaper but perhaps easier, they have always the advantage in the market. So the principle of reciprocity is, in my understanding, a very important question and should be much more implemented in the European legislation.
Thank you. Very good point. As a non-educated farmer and actually I have a veterinary degree, but I've never practiced with pigs. I understand, so I represent more a consumer here in this debate. So I understand that ultimately the question is pretty much around free trade, and there are some solutions, as remarked by you, Andreas. This concept, this principle of reciprocity, basically imposing some limits to the imports of food products, provided that the products are produced according to certain standards, which actually do not only include animal welfare, but also human welfare and many other factors. This is a quite drastic change in the society. So how do you foresee this change to happen? I mean, is it in the agenda, the political level? And then I will give you the word, Jonathan, just to understand as a consumer here and as a microbiologist, if this is in the agenda, in the political agenda.
This depends a lot which country is following it. In our legislation, in the medicine legislation which we currently have, it was the French people, the French government who introduced this principle. With the German government, it's very hard because we want to sell Mercedes and W to the other countries. So if we say you are not allowed to bring us meat, which is, for example, regarding cross promotion, perhaps they will say, then you cannot sell your Mercedes in our country. So Germany was not the driving part. We are very happy. And in France, they are very protective, much more protective to their, in my understanding, to their farmers than we are, for example, is, because we want to trade other things. But nevertheless, if we want to have higher standards and we want to do something for the society, especially regarding an antibiotics usage, without any restrictions from the free market, it will not work, in my understanding. And it is not on the agenda. It is certain countries are driving it.
Thank you. Jonathan?
I think we've got some pretty good examples of the application of this. So the use of hormones in beef production has been the major stumbling block between the US and the European Union for probably 3 decades. And it's one reason why the SPS agreement was signed in '96. So we have examples where things are excluded from the European market because of the way medicines are used. The European Union itself is big enough to cope with that kind of trade thing, so it's a massive market globally. We also have examples about where one country breaks away from the general standards across Europe and then gets punished. So in the late 1990s, there was a private members bill in the UK about sow stalls, which meant that the supermarkets went straight to the Netherlands and Denmark and imported pork from the continent rather than from the British farmers, and the pig industry in the UK collapsed because of that. I know we're not part of the union anymore, but that was when we were still in. So we have examples where it's possible to enact that. I'm not sure it holds true that Germany is more vulnerable to that trade negotiation compared to France. I know you export lots of cars, but France exports lots of other things as well, including lots of food. So I think it is possible to manage that. With Casper's presentation, what caught my eye more than anything else, you presented potentially a much more pig-friendly way of raising animals and allowing the sow to express natural behaviour with its litter by just simply extending the lactation period and allowing weaning to be a natural process rather than a forced one. I think if you presented that to consumers on a sort of regular basis, I think there would potentially be acceptance that that's actually a better way to do things than other ways. It's one of those things about placing yourself in that situation and trying to imagine what it would be like if a person had their baby taken away from them at 4 weeks and then be separated versus, say, 6 months. There's sort of things that you can play on the sort of emotions. So I think there are different examples we can sort of draw on in terms of like a position paper. Trade barriers are possible. We have a problem at the moment in that the World Trade Organization has been undermined by recent political changes in the US, so that's a bit more difficult to manage than it used to be. But it still exists, and it's still a way to sort of manage that trade barrier issue.
Okay, Casper, this is Jens Peter again. And now I want to ask you a question, because you only get comments all the time, but actually you mentioned the production system yourself. That was an organic farm where they weaned pigs at 10 weeks of age. They also had them outdoor, of course, which is part of it. They also, I know they use a genetic line which is slightly lower litter size. It is probably 17 pigs or something like that, 16 pigs. I think you suggested an even lower one with 12 pigs. I don't know where we can find genetics with that amount of pigs, but is it basically something like that you will recommend? Would you say this is the future? This is Elon Musk pigs that is walking around in in Western Jutland, I would call it, already, because then we have it and we just need the consumers. It's on the shelves in Denmark. It's bought. It is presented. He has a very good name for these pigs, tree pigs or whatever he call them, popple pigs, and so on. So is that what you recommend? Is that how you see the future as a young vet? Do you hear me, Casper?
Yeah. Sorry about the delay, Jens Peter, but for sure that's if I hear you. But that's what I expect to be within 100 years. It's only a matter of time before that happens, because this is only it's not sustainable to do what we do now, I think, and these issues about welfare and resistance and so on, they will be confronted in the end. I'm very sure about that, and we become more and more rich also. So it simply makes no sense that we take a lot of risks as human beings simply to our health without thinking about the welfare of the pigs when we are that rich. And I think, as I said, it's only a matter of time before it happens. Maybe it takes 100 years, or maybe we have to think that we have living too good for too long now, and we have to step 10 steps back and live like developing countries and eat more vegetables and maybe only eat pork 3.5 days a week instead of 7 days a week.
Yeah, thank you, Casper. I think the point is is quite clear, and I was actually surprised that there was well, there was also some skepticism raised by Francesc that this is maybe not realistic. But what Casper is talking about is a scenario 100 years from now, or within 100 years from now. You are more thinking about the now, I think, Francesc. And I was also surprised. That actually at the political level, this is foreseen as not impossible. For example, through the application of this principle of reciprocity, reciprocity, is it pronounced correctly? Now, if, because the politicians can make the change, but at the very end, we need to convince us, the consumers. I'm now representing the consumers, since they were missing in the program, and now I represent them. How do you convince me, and I can tell you that I would pay 50%, I would be very happy to pay 50% more for the same pork product that we pay today, and I would probably eat less pork, which would have a positive consequence on my health. So I'm a little bit biased, but let's suppose that I'm very poor, and actually I'm fighting, this is time of inflation, I don't have money, and you have to convince me that I have to pay 50% more and maybe eat less protein. What is the strategy here? I can start the discussion saying that I can see two elements that could be the driving force. One, health, so antimicrobial use, AMR risks, so on and so on. And the other one is animal welfare. So is it more convincing to approach the consumer and saying, look, 1 out of 4 pigs nowadays produced in Europe is dead, doesn't make it to the slaughterhouse, which accounts for approximately 25% mortality? Or is it more effective to say that there is a 1% risk that if you eat pork, you get infected with a resistant strain? I'm oversimplifying now, but what is the Troy horse that you would use actually to convince the consumers, the society, the politicians, that this is the change we need to make? And of course, Casper, you are also welcome to address this question from your young perspective with long-term views. But first, I would like to hear maybe from the older ones what they think.
Okay, the good thing is, do you buy the public grease, the public pig that I was talking about, for 50% more already? Good, because then you already did what the rest of the consumers have. It's quite important. The product is there. It's possible to buy it. We only need to sell it, you could say, in a way. And the farmer wants to produce it and so on. It's on the shelf. It's not 100 years from now. But there's not a big market in Denmark. It's a small market, but it's there. It's a co-op, it's called. It's one of the big supermarkets.
Sorry, Jens Peter, I was told that we need to talk closer to the microphone because otherwise they cannot hear, probably including myself. I don't think it's personal.
I was kind of eating the microphone, but sorry. Now I'll swallow it also. That's fine. Thank you.
I think, Luca, when we look in the Netherlands, for example, they had the same discussion on the broiler sector. So 3 years ago, they said, no, we want to go to a more sustainable way of producing broilers. So we want to go to more the slow-growing birds and this. And yeah, the only strategy that helped was to say the only broiler that you can sell in the Netherlands is this with this standard. And then you need to pay more, so you don't need the option. I think the biggest challenge, what Jens Peter is saying, if the, let's say on the pork we go to the same direction as eggs, that you can go to the supermarket and you have, I don't know, 30 different type of eggs that you can choose, then it's really difficult to create awareness why one egg. So now in the Netherlands they also try to sell different concepts of pork meat, but when you are there, it's really difficult for the consumer to understand why I need to choose this one or the other. So I think the only solution in a way is to push the whole market to one solution, but then you need to accept that the people that cannot pay these extra costs, probably will shift from pork meat to egg or another cheap protein, let's say. But then at least let's say from the producer's point of view, all are on the same on the same place, because they need to produce this product that will be in the supermarket. And I think what is the problem in Europe is let people choose depending on the concept and willing to pay extra, because when they are in the supermarket they go for the cheapest pork meat, because it's difficult to see the added value of paying the extra premium, let's say.
Yeah, but you acknowledge that is also due to a lack of communication, and for me it's very difficult. Jens Peter, from Monday I will start, when I go back I will have a holiday here in Crete. I will start looking for these products, and I promise I will start buying them. I don't eat a lot of pork, so it will be a minor contribution to the change. But you must admit that the communication to the consumers, I mean, do they know that these products exist? Do they actually understand the difference in terms of animal welfare, antibiotic use, and so on, compared to the conventional product? I think we can improve that part. Maybe the products are already there, but as you said also, Francesc, we need to make a labeling system that facilitate the choice and the understanding of the consumers when they are in the supermarket, because I don't think we are exactly there. Now, there is, I can see a round of questions here from the room, but let's not forget that this should also be a discussion with the people online, especially the stakeholders. And there are some important organizations who are there, so feel free to raise your hands or write on the chat if you would like to contribute to this very interesting discussion. Peter, there are questions from the chat?
Yeah, thank you, Luca. I can see that in relation to what you just said, there was a question earlier from Chantal Morel asking Jonathan, actually in extension to your presentation. She said, I feel that we have an information flow problem at the level of consumer. For example, why have labels on the meat if we don't have information on what the stamps mean at the point of sale? Any views on this? So I think this fits well into what we're talking about now. So I don't know, Jonathan, you also asked for the microphone. Maybe you can answer this.
I don't think I can answer that question, but I did want to make a point that we don't just eat our meat from supermarkets. A lot of our meat comes through eating out and also in institutional canteens. So one of the big ways to sort of have a shift is actually to think about that. And if you, certainly in the UK, if you go to any restaurant now, chicken is offered as a sort of side thing on every single dish. It's become a sort of ubiquitous part of what you consume when you go out and eat. Every UK sandwich shop is filled with chicken. So when we're thinking about labelling, it's also thinking about how do we label for that kind of catering market as well. What kind of standards are they setting? And when we think about government are a big buyer of this type of meat. They're probably a driver. They could be a driver of best standard setting in that sense. It doesn't have to be individual consumers. It could be bigger corporations that are actually doing something about this. And they don't need complicated messaging. You know, you can sort of pitch that and actually present that as a case without necessarily having this labelling process, as long as we've got traceback on that system. And Chantal, maybe that answers your question a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, it does. But technically, it doesn't sound very complicated, actually, to make a labeling system that is going not only to the retail system, but also to restaurants and whoever
and I think
is serving food.
The one difficulty I have with that, and it's what I said before, is that if that then becomes a standard for the farmers and they're not compensated, then they will lose out. They'll probably end up paying more for their production and maybe making less profit. So there has to be some care taken to make sure that that's not then uses a stick to beat the farmers at the same time as raising standards. So they need to be compensated for that process.
And who will pay for that?
Well, ultimately it'd be the consumer, but if we're talking about changing the system and making the end consumer pay more, there are steps towards that don't need to be that complicated to make sure it's achieved. And differentiation of product in the market, I think, is much harder with meat than it's been, say, with eggs for some reason. Don't ask me why, but I think it's harder to do that.
So if I understand in simple terms, what you're saying is that the process is long, and before actually this new system becomes self-sustainable, the central states will have to support the farmers whenever there is potential crisis, because the demand is not there yet, so it's still developing. And I mean, we use tax money for different ways, and one way could be also to support the farmers when the provided that they meet, of course, the production standards that we have discussed this morning.
I think what I'd say, public procurement of meat could be looked at more carefully as a vehicle for change. Yeah? And then when you go into a supermarket, the product that's presented and placed to you is not done by accident. So the supermarkets know what they're doing. And there needs to be an engagement in that process. They know better than we do about what labelling works and what doesn't, where to place it in the fridge, bit by the door, etc. So they know what they're doing in this sense. So if we're thinking about change and presentation, let's go to the people who do it to keep in business. I mean, that's what I'd say.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we're actually missing another important stakeholder here, the big supermarket chains. Yeah.
Kasper, please, you have a comment as well?
Yes, thank you. It was just to follow up on Luca's comment. You mentioned maybe we should make the consumers aware when they buy the meat what consequences it has. And I actually think that the pictures on the packages of cigarettes is a quite good example on that is not working, and also that consumers is quite short-term thinking. So I would also like to say that it's maybe a bit radical, so please understand me correctly. I like to say that we cannot convince consumers because they are a little bit unclever, or you can also say they are a little bit uninformed. So basically that's impossible, and following that we have to take like a council of clever people have to take the decision on what is a sustainable source of pork meat. And I think we have to think very clearly about what the definition sustainable is, and following that protein from plant sources should be a lot cheaper than protein from animal sources. Thank you.
This is a little bit exactly what I wanted to say. We are talking all the time, and I cannot hear it anymore. It's the poor consumer. He is not informed. Is this because we are not providing the information and so on? We have to accept that 80%, I would say no, 80%, perhaps it's 70%, perhaps it's also 90%. They don't want to be informed. They are not interested. We can provide them as much information as we want. They are not interested. They are buying T-shirts for €5. They know exactly that they are not produced as they should be, but they are not interested. They buy them because they are cheap. So if we want to change something, I fully agree with Kasper, then we cannot let them any choice. There is only one pork meat. If we are thinking this is the right way to produce it, then is there no choice? We have to skip the choice. But this is a very radical approach, because then we are not anymore following a market. And then I come back to the statement, if we are doing it, then we need to protect our market. Because if we know and if we accept that the consumer is not interested and we don't want to let him any choice, then we must skip the choice from overseas, for example. And this is for me the main question. It is not a lack of information. If he want to buy better pork meat, he could buy already today biological pork meat, but at the end of the week, which pork meat is thrown away because it is no longer valid? It's the biological section, because in the supermarkets in Germany, they are not buying it. It is there, but they are not buying it.
This idea that is passing through is basically that consumers are ignorant, and I think it's pretty clear from the picture we are providing today that this is the case, and that we need a top-down decision. So a group of technical people that is making this proposal to make the change, making sure that it is sustainable at the global level, so either at the country level or the EU level, there should be the principle you mentioned or whatever system that's ensure this sustainability and competitiveness at the global level. Now, I go back because you ended up with a question, Casper, and I still have to find out. So let's suppose that we are the group of experts, talented, super skilled people that with long-term visions that actually have this concept that the change is needed. Okay, we go out now, and what do we do next to make the change happening? Because otherwise it's only blah, blah. Do we try to convince the politicians? It will be very difficult because as it was said by Casper in his presentation, the politician primarily ask for consents. I mean, they want to have the votes, so they will have a very short life if they follow our advice. So assuming, and I'm sure that we don't all agree on this, but assuming that this is the way to go, what is the next step in practical terms to make it happen?
Just my opinion would be that there's no other way than the political. And we also live in a democracy, so we probably have to make a democratic process in some way. So it has to be, you could say, debate and all the focus that you can make. That's the way we make changes in our society. Because I'll just add one point: there's no shortage of technical persons. There's so many technical persons involved in the pig production we have now. They have made all kind of legislation and standards and everything. So remember that the production we have is agreed upon in the technical and political system and so on. So it's not a random, it's just an accident or random event that it is like it is. It has been thought through by a lot of technical and political persons already. But I think it is to make a movement. I mean, debate, something like that.
We are talking now about antibiotic use in pig production, but the problem, at least locally, and I talk for the Netherlands right now, is a bit bigger than only that. Over the past couple of years, we had a Minister of Nitrogen Affairs because of the fact that we had a major issue in relation to the legislation we have developed ourselves or at EU level, and really the animal production sector was blamed for a major part of the problem we are currently in. So that had major implications also for, let's say, for the politician, because a new political party was formed in support of the farmers to, let's say, to go against this development. That means that we are not only talking about antibiotic use, we are talking about sustainability, concept of circularity. Do we want import of soya from North and South America? Because that's a major driver for the problems we are in at the moment. So only continuing sending messages on very detailed problems, I wonder whether that will work in the long run.
Yeah, and your comment, I think, is in line with what Casper, with a provocative talk, that this is not actually sustainable. And he mentioned, and also during the talks this morning, we mentioned, at least Jonathan, you did the environmental impact on the top of the human health. So yes, we are discussing a very specific, small topics within a much broader context. And I think actually all the topics that you mentioned, this green agenda is much higher than AMR right now in the political agenda. So the discussion is there. Andreas, from the chat.
Yes, there's a comment in the chat which I think relates to what we talked about before, whether we should, who should make the decisions, and probably this is in support of a top-down approach. It's Isabella Auberger. She writes, in Austria, almost every major supermarket chain now has its own animal welfare label. One large chain has converted its entire fresh meat range to animal welfare, with huge advertising campaigns on TV, in newspapers, etc. And yet, in times of high inflation, consumers are still turning to the much cheaper supermarket-owned brands, in brackets, some of which do not even source their resources domestically, but import meat from the East, for example. So I think this adds to a nice tale to what we discussed before, and supports how difficult it is to actually, make a label and convince the consumer.
Actually, I think we are getting to the conclusion that you don't have to convince the consumer, but not to give him an alternative, right? So, Andreas, please go ahead.
As we have the goal also to have a certain message at the end of our plenary discussion. I want to come back to your question, and I want to be a little bit more positive, because at the moment, you ask me what should we do. I'm saying regarding this small question of antibiotic usage in pigs, we are already on the way for long years. In some countries, very long years, in others not so long, but in Europe, we are on the way. We have a legislation putting us on the way and helping us also, like I've heard sometimes the farmers, especially not my farmers, but others, farmers are not so hearing what the veterinarian is saying, perhaps in some cases. I hope that my clients are doing what I'm saying. But the legislation is also putting pressure on the farmers to do something. I will try. Now it's better. So what do we have to do? For some diseases in our pig farms, we have already developed solutions that we can manage them without antibiotics in the last years. I'm very positive. In some cases, we were able. But we have some diseases, for example, pre-weaning or post-weaning diarrhea, the umbilical hernia. We are still working on these issues. And there we have, until now, I don't see the clear solution. For me, it's a very big task in my daily life to find solutions and to try and to test if I can do it with other things like feed ingredients and so on. But for some of these questions, we have already solutions, for others not. And we need to work with the universities and everything on these problems which we have not yet solved. I hope that somebody can hear me. Okay. Okay. This is the task for the moment, at the moment, which we have to work on, because we are on the way of antibiotic reduction, but we are not yet. And I think we all think in this room it is good not to produce animals with growth promotion. We are all agree it has less antibiotics as it should. This is for me the goal of antibiotic-free pig production. With the goal, I think we all agree. But for some questions we still need solutions. And in the next years, I hope that we will find a solution, for example, for the E. coli problem after weaning. And it unfortunately is, and this is the problem, we cannot move the weaning age so simply because of all the trade issues and the economical questions. So we need perhaps to find, like for other diseases in our system, which we have currently, also there we need solutions which should be developed to use less antibiotics in the production.
Yeah, I appreciate your comment, Andreas, but I don't know. This morning, some data were presented comparing the productivity, the performance parameters, but also the health parameters between the antibiotic or raised without antibiotics farms and the conventional farms. And actually, I didn't see any impact post-weaning due to post-weaning diarrhea. So it doesn't seem that actually post-weaning diarrhea is an issue.
Yeah.
No, hold on a second, because yeah, I follow your pragmatic view, but we couldn't even agree before the start of this discussion if this type of production, which is not a drastic change, I mean, if something is already happening, if it is a viable strategy or not. We could not find consensus on that within this room. And now what are you exactly, what is next? Because this, I think, is in the scenario that we are depicting now, which is quite a radical change that maybe will happen in 50 or 100 years from now. This is a very small change. I mean, and we are already there. I mean, we are telling that basically we can already have farms where 60 to 90% of the pigs do not receive treatment, at least after weaning. So why not starting from there? Why not saying this is, we are there, actually. Let's start from this type of production and make it kind of a standard in Europe, and then protect the European market from the import of products that are produced deviating from these standards.
Because I must be the bad guy
Yeah,
now,
go ahead.
because I don't agree with your conclusion out of the data. These data were generated, you might correct me, these were farms which had already a very high health status, and they decided I will be part of a labor program in less antibiotics. Those farms who have a problem, they were not going into, so they were not part of the data comparedness. You compare very high health status, and this is the same in France. If you have a very high health status, yeah, then it's not a problem to be antibiotic free. But I'm talking about the normal, and a lot of farms are still using antibiotics. So of course, if you have a very high health status, you have not a problem with prevenient diarrhea. Yeah, of course you can be antibiotic free. Yeah. This is the standard. But there are a lot of reasons, and this is what I understand in all our work as veterinarians and what the COPAL, for example, is doing. They're looking for weak points. Why in this farm we have a health problem? And we try to find a solution. So I see for antibiotic-free pig production still post-weaning diarrhea as a very big problem, because I don't know, even if I have enough money, how to solve it very good.
Yeah. The point is taken, and it is quite clear. And it goes back actually to one of the points you made, Jonathan, about the farms and the farmers, because it seems that this type of production requires has some infrastructural requirements and some management, especially requirements, and some skills also by the farmers. It was remarked several times by Stine this morning. So what do we do, Andreas, please stay with us. What do we do with these farms that, farmers that are not able to make it? And you had some thoughts about that in your presentation. Can you elaborate on it, Jonathan? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm just thinking about an example from a different industry. So, and this is going back to the 1970s when the UK Milk Marketing Board brought in milk quality payments, and they had Band A, B, C. Band A, you got a premium because it was clean milk. Band C, you got fined because it was dirty milk, and Band B, you got the same price. And when that was implemented, farms actually moved into Band A very quickly. So quickly that the processing units couldn't keep up with the quality of milk being produced at farm level. Now, the work that was presented this morning would seem to indicate we could actually start to band how well people are doing with raising pigs without antibiotics. And there could be premiums paid at different levels of, say, you bit 90% your pigs, or 60 or 50. And that would set a bar with a clear market signal to encourage farmers to move towards something different. And then we probably see some reaction from the farmers. Farmers are very fast at responding to those signals. If we don't give them, then how are they supposed to change or have encouragements to change? So I think that's one area that potentially should be explored a little bit more carefully in terms of both the ability but also the willingness for farmers to shift into different things. But we have a role in terms of setting what that metric looks like. The milk quality thing was set by microbiological standards which were well established, I think, before that was implemented, and good sampling procedures. But as scientists, we should be helping set metrics that allow the market to then set guidelines around that. I just want to go back to a point that Andreas, you raised about not giving consumers a choice, and that's where legislation becomes critical. So we legislate on broilers about the number of broilers per square metre, or the kilograms of broilers, I think, and that's now standard. And then it becomes a global standard. So if the EU sets that, then generally speaking the world follows. So there is a leadership role in terms of animal health, animal production standards that people listen to. And it becomes important that the EU both set those standards and show leadership in the direction in which they're going.
Perhaps I can add to your question. 10 years ago, when I was, or 12 years ago, I started with practice. And we had in the south of Germany a lot of small sow farms. And they were selling their piglets with 4 weeks to specialized rearing units. So, and there were a big mixture of piglets, and of course, what is going on, if you mix them, they become sick, because if you have 10 farms or 12 farms, they all have disappeared. These systems have disappeared from the market, due to also other reasons, but they are not longer there. And this is also a health and economical question, why they were not producing anymore. So of course, if we are going and develop our systems, we will, as you said it, we will lose some of the farms. If I set the threshold too high, they will stop production in animal welfare, in antibiotics and so on. So of course, there will also be a change in the structure of the production, because some of the farmers will not be able to follow what are the rules. And I have seen it in the pig production, of course. They were the most consumers of antibiotics, of course, but now they have disappeared. They are not longer there.
Maybe some of them will manage to make the change, and some of them will not. And but I just my comment to you was, because in the beginning you actually said you were kind of agreeing that it should be a top-down decision when we talk about. Can I talk? Yeah. Sorry, we had a technical issue in the room. When we talked about consumers, you said consumers are ignorant and we should take a top-down decision. Where we talk about farmers, then you change a little bit the perspective. But do you still agree that we should take the top-down decision? Because otherwise I see a contradiction
No, you
there.
misunderstood me. I said correctly, if we want to change our system, it will not help to give more information to the consumer. If we want to change our system, then the consumer must accept what is lying in.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer in top-down decisions. I'm a poor democracy. I say, okay, but then I must accept that perhaps our change in the structure will not be so fast, because the consumer is not following us. I'm a believer that the consumer is the key, but if we cannot convince him, but I am able to accept that I cannot convince him. And if he takes the choice to the sheep ones, okay, then he will get also further on a pig production in Europe. Then I must accept that I'm producing for such a market.
Yeah.
I can accept it,
Yeah.
others perhaps not.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer in top-down
top-down
decisions, but
decision.
I believe
Yeah.
that it is not able, by more information to the consumer, to change our system.
Yeah.
This is-
Okay. Then I can see a difference then between your position and Casper's position. Any other thoughts? I can see people tired. You were very active yesterday at dinner. Maybe we need a coffee break. I don't know. We don't have any coffee break planned. Yeah, we still have 45 minutes, right? In principle, we can. Any inputs from the audience? I think this is a very interesting discussion, and we have been missing a little bit inputs from the online attendees. So this is time to speak up. If you have any ideas, any thoughts?
I can see, Casper, you made a comment that you agree. I don't know if you want to elaborate your comment in the chat. No, okay. Well, I have a question maybe to you, Jonathan, because you mentioned that the idea of, to me it sounded a bit like benchmarking in terms of how to rank farms and so on. But what about the welfare issues? Because I think for many farms it's very easy to lower the use of antibiotics if there's a carrot at the end waiting for you. But then what about welfare? I mean, you can lower antibiotic use, but will the pigs be healthy?
I'm not a pig farmer, so I don't know. And you guys have been doing the experiments, but I think you're right to raise that, and that's where the issue will be about how will the metric be created. So it might be about lowering antimicrobial use and maintaining welfare issues or improving welfare issues. It can't be a simple metric, potentially. But I think there should be some science about developing that metric so it can then be used as a way of setting standards and allowing the market to differentiate accordingly in that way. So you raise a good point. It's not as straightforward as say certain other things.
Yeah, and I mean, my question was not only to you, it was more to also raise a point. So I don't know if maybe Andreas, you have a comment or on something else?
Yeah, I have something. I think, excuse me, Luca, but we have 45 minutes. I don't need a coffee. I'm very.
Go ahead.
I'm here. I want to raise another issue because, as I said in my presentation, we are talking today about this issue, and my understanding is due to antimicrobial resistance in animals and their impact on antimicrobial resistance in humans. And this could perhaps also be an outcome of a workshop today. I'm not believing that all the money we are putting in the system here at this point to reduce a little bit of antibiotics in the animals has really a big impact on the antimicrobial resistance situation in humans. And my wish would be that we make, let's say we have a little a pot of money and a pot of resources to fight against antimicrobial resistance in humans, which is a problem and a growing problem. Should we not detect those issues where we can make with our money the most effect on the problem? Makes it sense that we put it in antimicrobial free pork production, or do we clear the water in China from the production areas and say here the money, instead of making here 1 ton in Europe less from antibiotics, you clear your water, that not the whole river is contaminated with resistant bacteria due to all the resistance and the antibiotics which are thrown away. So should we not talk to also the politicians much more about resource management in this issue? Because the money is sometimes, in my understanding, put into projects where I say we will never fight antimicrobial resistance in humans very effectively by doing this, but by doing that we could be much more effective.
Yeah, and thank you for raising this new point. I was a little bit hesitant in the beginning of the workshop where I should, because this is it falls actually under my area of expertise. I have been studying AMR for over 30 years, and especially zoonotic transmission between animals, humans, and the environment as well. I cannot agree less. We are wasting a lot of resources, especially in this European Western context. Maybe the situation in other countries can be different. But yes, we should definitely, that could be one of the points in the position paper, that resources could be used better. It's not by this mantra of minimizing the use of antibiotics is not necessarily decreasing the risk of AMR in human medicine. And this is, of course, an upstream issue, but this is why I asked at the beginning of the plenary session, is the Troy horse AMR, AMU, or is animal welfare? Because actually, as a consumers, I'm more concerned about the second one, and I would like the change, and I would be willing to pay more to ensure a better life to our animals, and have a system that is more sustainable in the long term. Probably I will not be living in 100 years from now, but I believe that the scenario depicted by Casper is actually a pretty good one. I'm on his side. So yes, I think we agree on this, and I believe we can ask the others, but I think there is quite a lot of consensus, at least in this room, not necessarily outside this room, on this topic. Anything to add on the AMR issue? I would like to make a specification, though, that, and this is clear also from the JACRA, the third JACRA report, and a lot of data from the Netherlands showing that this decrease, the Netherlands was a good case because they had a huge usage of antimicrobials in the veterinary sector with a very low usage in the medical sector. They decreased drastically within 5 years. They have seen a reduction in AMR indicators in animals. They haven't actually seen this reduction in the human clinical isolates. So that's a good example. But I wanted to mention one exception, which is the foodborne pathogens, where actually like Campylobacter, especially fluoroquinolone resistance, where it's a little bit different because we know that these bacteria are coming from animals and probably the selective pressure plays a role. However, even for those, the link between usage and AMR is not clear at all. So you see situations where, for example, all of a sudden we have an emergence of fluoroquinolone resistance in Campylobacter jejuni, also in countries where fluoroquinolones have almost never been used in poultry production, like in Denmark. You have an issue about import because some countries are still using the fluoroquinolones there for the export products with Campylobacter that is resistant to fluoroquinolones. So yes, there is this small exception, and then there is also the precautional principle. Even if a single person is dying in Europe because of antimicrobial use in animals, can we how to say, do not consider the risk even if it is very small? I'm challenging myself because I have exactly the same opinion. If you have anything to add on that, please go ahead.
Regarding the Campylobacter, for example, this was a wide discussion in WHO. And we all agreed it comes from the food chain, but the medical doctors in our group said, yeah, but they are not treated normally in humans, so we don't have an AMR issue there. But I have a question for you. Because this was also something I had in my presentation, but I skipped it because I was not really good in the data there. Is it not also a danger if we are not treating animals because we want to have an antibiotic-free production, especially for the food chain, that we have sometimes perhaps animals infected going into the food chain because we have not treated them? Is this a danger? So can it have a negative influence if I'm really producing the completely chain antibiotic-free, that they have perhaps a negative influence on the food chain? I don't know. But we always say, yeah, we need to treat them correctly also to prevent that sick animals are going into the food chain, for example.
Yeah. So this is my personal opinion, and I don't. I think that risk is very minimal. So what you are saying is basically by using less antibiotics, is there a risk that we get more foodborne pathogens on our plates? I think that the main we don't use antibiotics actually for preventing transmission of foodborne pathogens. We use them for treating disease in animals, and the main barrier, the main protection for consumers is actually the hygiene at the slaughterhouse and the hygiene measures in the household, the cross-contamination, you know, all of that. So my personal opinion is that this risk is hypothetical and not based on any scientific evidence. There is another discussion that is going on now in Denmark if we could actually try to reduce the duration of treatment for some indications without actually having an impact on the efficacy of the antibiotic and also on the development of resistance. And there are a couple of projects actually running now at the University of Copenhagen actually to assess that in relation to treatment of post-weaning diarrhea, which is, again, there is a regulatory gap there again because we are supposed to follow the label recommendations, and the new EU legislation is actually very strict about that. So it's another situation where we are trying to generate data to show that this is actually not, should not be imposed to the veterinarian. The veterinarian should be free to assess whether the excess of the antibiotic is actually needed or not, because but we need some scientific data. I understand that it's a long process, but once we produce this data, maybe we can convince the European Union that we can shorten the duration of treatment, which is also the trend in human medicine. Nowadays, I remember my family doctor telling me, you have to get the antibiotic until the end of the course. This has changed in human medicine when the patient recover. The extra use of antibiotics is no longer considered as a way to prevent relapse and all this stuff. So we moved a little bit the topic now. I would like to go back to the original one, but there is a question from the chat.
Yes, I think Kasper, you would like the word. You have a question to Jens Peter.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it lost a little bit structure, Luca, but I have a question for Jens Peter. And you mentioned 2 studies in your presentation, and what I like to stress is the sensitivity of manipulating with how much antimicrobials we use, because you mentioned there was a little bit lower mortality in the farrowing unit. However, there was an increase on 1.1% mortality in the nursery section, and then there also was an increase on 4% in hernias. Could you elaborate a little bit on the lower mortality in the farrowing section, and also that the study has only been performed in 2 herds? I mean that the results of your studies are very, very important if they are to be extrapolated to all other herds. Let's say it causes a 1% mortality of all Danish wiener pigs, that equals 200,000 pigs, and it's also a welfare issue, because we are not talking about chains and straw and more space. We are talking about mortality. My point is also that, and I remember it very well, because I just went out from the veterinary studies and I saw myself becoming pen blind out in the field, starting to neglecting a little bit the many issues there are. So we should also be a little careful as scientists. And also another study you mentioned where there was a lower, a better productivity. It's only said on the slides, but a lower antimicrobial use. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that on that productivity you mentioned? Thank you.
Yes, I'll try to see if I can answer the rather long question. But yeah, first about the studies. When we compared mortalities, we actually had 10 hertz with raised without antibiotics compared to what we consider the national average. So for that part, it was 10 hertz. But I still think 10 hertz is very, very few. So what is this general for? But they may actually be, because it was only like 40 to 50 hertz at that time. But the racing picks without. But I think it shows that they are very hertz with a very good management before they enter. So I more think that it might have been low even before they started. So it's not really, but so there's some caution about this, about the mortalities. I was also cautious, and I said it was non-significant and so on. The other thing about the increased mortality after weaning, which was actually higher if you think about 1.5% compared to 3%, is 50% extra. Then I think that could be related to the euthanasia of those animals with hernia. So that's the way I interpret this. Yeah. So that was about the mortality and the welfare. But the other thing that I think I don't understood that about the productivity. But I think the most interesting thing was when you compared overall these figures, it didn't reduce the productivity very much. That would be my conclusion. So you have a comparable productivity to normal figures. So it's not something that has a radical effect, drastic effect. That's the only thing we can conclude. But you raise an issue, and that is whether it's actually animal welfare supporting to have this raised without antibiotics, because there is an incitement not to treat. We haven't discussed it very much, but a little bit. I think Andreas has mentioned it also, because it costs money. So if you cut an ear tag, it costs 100 kroners or something like that. That would be 15 euros or something. That's more than the walk we are going, the tour we are having here. Or that's the same amount as the tour we are having. So it will mean something to people. 15 euro, and it's not to one pig, it's to 100 pigs maybe, and so on. So that's why I was also a little bit sensitive to when we had this, we have a discussion early on whether we should say that there was no effect on health and welfare, because I think there is a high risk, and especially because people react to money and farmers react to money. So there is this incitement not to treat, and that is actually a high risk. So you need some extra control or extra trust in the farmers if they're going to use this, because it's so obvious not to give them an extra chance and wait too long.
Point clear. And yes, extra control, or maybe the French strategy that you give the bonus to all for all animals. So you actually avoid the how to say, let's call it the possibility of cheating, or the possibility of prioritizing money over animal welfare in the farmer. So yes, I think these are more technical solutions. I don't foresee these as major obstacles. And sorry, apologies, Casper, if we were deviating a little bit. There were no questions at some point, and Andreas had this point on AMR, so I just took the liberty to respond. We can go back now to the main issue, and again, I would ask the people online we are now approaching the closure of the workshop. So if there are any remarks, especially from the organizations who are online, about the discussions we had this afternoon, they would be very, very welcome. Otherwise, I'm looking at the people in the audience. It looks like they desperately need coffee. Sorry, Mathieu.
Yeah, just a comment
Go
to
ahead.
your previous discussion on the MR. I think it's really important for us to know the evaluation of this risk. The risk for the animal, to know if the antibiotics are still efficient, the risk of transmission to humans, the risk of exposition to the farmers because they are exposed to bacteria, people that are working at the slaughterhouse too, and we have not enough monitoring of that. So how can we define a strategy and define objectives to know what could be the good level of antimicrobial that we can use at the farm to first save the pigs, control the health of the animals, health of the farmers, health of people that are at the slaughterhouse, and also the one sales problem. So today for us it's difficult as a farmer or cooperative to have clear objectives. We know that we have to decrease, but we know that we could have zero antibiotics. That's impossible because we'll all the time we have disease, digestive, respiratory one, so we have to treat the animal. Because you say health is part of the welfare. So we have to take care about that. So today I think that's when you say what are the next step, I think we need more monitoring and more objective, so that I think the discussion will be easier if you know where we have to go. So just a comment to your previous discussion.
Which is actually a very good comment. We don't even know where we are going. So we lack again this long-term vision goal of this benchmarking system has worked very well in reducing the use of antibiotics. There was this initially, I think it was a 50% reduction in 2030. Most countries have already got, some countries have already got there, or at least we are in line with the plan, but what and then what? I mean, what is the standard that we want to reach? I can think loud and say that in countries like Denmark and the Netherlands, we have got to a level, a very low level of antibiotic usage, that the risks in these countries of transferring AMR to humans are very low according to the most recent scientific and surveillance data. So that could be one option, for example. But I don't know. I don't have an answer. It's a good point you make, but we could take some model countries as like the goal and say we can all get there because they have demonstrated that it is possible to get there. Probably some countries will rise issues because not all production systems are the same. Not all industries are structured in the same, so the implementation of some changes is not equally doable in all countries and production systems. But that's a very complex discussion that it maybe is beyond the scope of this workshop. Of course. Andreas?
Yeah, only a small, a quick comment. The first step would help. It would help already if everybody is looking on the AMEC and the MIA classification of antibiotic classes and is using as less as possible of those classes who contributes in a higher level and a higher risk to IMR in humans. And there we have also in Europe a little bit of how would we say in Germany, air to breathe. So we could be better because in some countries enrofloxacin is still used in a large amount. So the first step could also, because there are these lists and they are there, these lists, not because they're funny, to look really and to follow as much as possible these classifications.
But in many countries, this is already done. So basically, in Denmark, we don't use third-generation cephalosporins, we don't use fluoroquinolones, we don't use colistin. So basically, so it would be a matter of aligning maybe the countries to a certain level.
If you look on these maps who are given
Yeah, there is
in
still
Europe,
work
you
to
have
do.
some countries which
Yeah.
are still using some classes.
But if I
very
was
often.
Spanish, I would tell you that we have reduced the use of
Yeah.
colistin by 70%, whatever. So all countries have done some progress. We must
Exactly.
recognize and acknowledge, but there are still diversities. Yeah. Again, I think the question I asked in the beginning is still relevant. Is the driver AMU, AMR, or animal welfare? I still continue to be convinced that the driver should be or better, the rationale, the argument should be animal welfare, and then maybe we can use also AMR because it's a global, it's a holistic approach we are considering now. But did you have something to add about? No. Faces here are more and more tired and demanding coffee, I think. The audience.
There is some comment from Isabella online. It's a quite long comment, but I can try.
You can also give the word to Isabella because it's nice to
Yeah,
hear.
I did propose that, but Isabella prefers not to have the word. So so I'll read it out, and then Isabella.
But it would be nice if what is the affiliation to know who is she speak on behalf of.
Animal welfare organization.
Okay, good.
I think. Okay. She writes, for us as an animal welfare organization, the solution is to change the whole system from breeding to fattening, because it all belongs together. Antibiotic use, tail docking, etc. All of this, among other things, the effect of a production method that is in no way beneficial to the animals and satisfies their needs. Solutions such as longer suckling periods, significantly more space, access to the outside climate, litter, etc. Implementation of a precautionary principle as is customary in organic production. And of course all of this only goes hand in hand with a reduction in meat consumption and of course a reduction in food that ends up in the rubbish bin along the entire production chain and then ultimately with the end consumer. I don't know, Isabella, if you want to elaborate on this, or otherwise, of course, everyone else is free to comment, but at least this is a point of view.
I could keep on keeping alive the people here with questions and comments, but I prefer to give up at this stage. And I would like to thank all the people that connected today. And I'm so sorry about the technical issues. I have spent a lot of time to make sure that everything was running smoothly, but obviously it was not enough. Another lesson to learn. So apologies to all of you. A big thanks also to the people here in the room, the speakers, both here and online. Thank you, Casper, again, for the provocative talk. And thank you for the European Commission for making this workshop possible. I don't know if I can wrap up in any ways the discussion we had today, and if there is enough consensus to write a position paper. I think it's going to be quite difficult, but I need some time to think about it. And if anyone among the online attendees have ideas to help me in this process, you are very welcome to contact me by email. And you can also contact me by email if you have any feedback, either positive or negative, about the workshop. So I can only say that it seems that this antibiotic-free production is a viable strategy for minimizing the use of antibiotics. There are still barriers and obstacles. They don't seem to be unsurmountable, but in the long term, this is just a minimal change. So the scenario that was actually discussed this afternoon is a little bit different. And implies a more drastic change that goes beyond antibiotic-free production and encompasses other aspects of sustainability that include the environment and the society in general. So it's going to be a long process, but let's try not to be blind. and I think I have learned a lot during the workshop. Thank you again to the people online. And we are on the way, so let's try to be positive, and let's also make the right decisions when we go in the supermarket and when we talk about these topics with the people around us. At the end, I'm getting a little bit older, and I believe that if you want to make a change in life, you can do it in your daily life more than by writing position papers and talking to an audience like this. So let's try to make the change in our real life, daily life. Thank you very much for your attention. A big, we should give the hands to everybody here. Thank you very much for today.